Well, good afternoon. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Should be a rousing discussion today. Mark Reed, my guest, always provides an interesting discussion, and it's actually real. There's no beating around the bush. Wanted to say a couple things about voting, though. This is our great opportunity to change. For all of you that think, oh, well, it doesn't make it a difference, and, I don't know about politics. Well, do you know that gas prices are high? Crime is on the rise. Your groceries cost more. Even if you're not that engaged with the rest of it, time for a change. And I want to point out that a variety of politicians every year, even in this state, get elected. And they're not always the ones that you would expect. In a conservative area, occasionally a liberal gets elected. In a liberal area, occasionally a conservative gets elected. So I do believe that your vote does make a difference. And if you want any right to complain about these problems that we currently have, you need to get off your butt. You need to get out. You need to vote. Now, I hope that most of my listeners are already voting, but I bet you got family members or neighbors that you could convince. Hey, let's go get a cup of coffee. I'll buy you a cup of coffee and we'll go vote. Now, that's a pretty small bribe. But, hey, if that's what it takes, if you need to handhold, if it's somebody that just is a senior but maybe wouldn't get out and vote, ballot harvesting is legal in California.
I made a joke about that. I said, you need to invite 10 people to the polls, get them out there, and then you need to take 10 people to the polls. And there's a difference between the two. One is a kidnapping, and the other one is an invitation.
Yes, and I'm promoting an invitation.
Well, the kidnapping is you take them to start. You tell them, look, I'm going to take you to Starbucks. You bring them to the polls. You say, go in there and vote, and I'll take you to Starbucks afterwards.
Well, timing might matter.
Timing might matter, but they still voluntarily got in there.
Yeah. Well, people need to get in there, or they need to never ever complain again.
Well, that's one of our greatest constitutional rights is to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the way in which we create revolutions. We change the way in which things are happening. Otherwise, we swim around or we fly around like lemmings. We just keep voting the norm. And if you're happy with the norm, then vote the norm. If you're not happy with it, like you pointed out, inflationary rates, housing rates, our school systems, our gasoline, our insurance rates, you name it, it's sky high anymore.
Yep.
And we still have people who want to raise more taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Biden has come out. He said he's coming after retirements at this point. And so they want to continue raising taxes. And then you look at it, they say that we're not in an inflation right now, in a recession, and we are.
Well, this is the first time in history where they redefined recession.
Yeah.
That's typical of Joe Biden, but I don't know that the Democrats have ever seen a dollar they didn't believe needed to be taxed at least 3 more times.
That's why we look at it and we look at the direct taxation, and rather than looking at the tax wedge and what is the buying power of our dollar, our tax wedge right now is in the high 70s, which means out of every dollar we have 20 cents to 22 cents of buying power.
Mm-hmm.
So every dollar you spend, somehow, in some way, at least 3/4 of it, 75% of it, makes its way back to the government one way or the other.
Wait, they earned that money, didn't they?
Who did?
The government.
Of course they did. They have to pay for these billion-dollar elections they get into for the presidency.
I want to point out that your county is a pretty rural county generally.
Yes, it is.
Low population as compared to the amount of land mass. And those types of areas tend to have rugged individualists.
Absolutely.
Small business owners, they're connected to the land.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're only part-time farmers, as I look at your area and I drive through it, almost everybody's got a goat or a cow or chickens or something. You're connected to the land. You're a farmer in a sense.
Yes.
Your county has a huge issue with farming right now.
Mm-hmm.
And water. And it is a difficult problem, but it's a very real problem. It has to do with primarily what they call the white zone, which is an area that the only water they get is from the sky or if they pump it out of the ground. There's no surface irrigation water there. And the current group of supervisors for Madera County has decided in their infinite wisdom that they know how much they should charge you for your own water. And it's so absorbent that it's going to drive a lot of farmers out of business. Where do you stand on that? Because I know you're involved in this.
Well, I spoke at the Board of Supervisors meeting where they were considering the fees and the fines for overdrawing water in the white areas, the groundwater.
Well, there's fees whether you overdraft or not. It starts with a fee.
Yeah, it starts with fees, but these were fees and fines for going over the allotted amount. Now they want the farmers. Let me describe the district, because the District 5 is a very interesting district, because you have the mountain area, the mountain people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they live on the fracture system, which is a very limited water supply as well, which if we continue using septic systems and pumping our sewage water back into the ground without being treated, we're going to poison our water system. Then you go down to the flatland. These are all different interests. The flatland is the ranchers and the farmers, and the state is coming after their land. And they do it by cutting back on water allotments and then charging fees and fines. It gets to the point where you cannot sell your crop for what you have in it, so you now have lost the value of your property. Mm-hmm. They're forcing the farmers to fallow 1/3 of their land. They're cutting back the water allotments. If you go over it, then you're going to be fined, or your fees are going up. Okay, this is going to drive all of these farmers out of business completely, and we're watching it. It's also going to affect the coffers of the county as well, because as the crops are cut back, as the labor is cut back, as the property values go down, less tax money goes into the county of Madera. So they're chopping their own foot off.
Well, so I want to point out that if less money's coming in, one of the biggest budget constraints, one of the biggest expenditures is emergency services.
Public safety.
Police, fire, ambulance, paramedics, public safety.
Well, police, fire, paramedics, parole, probation, jail systems, court systems, all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
the DA's office, investigators, all of these things fall under public safety. And so when you start cutting that money back, it's like, I'm going to get into the CSD that my opponent and his boss has proposed, but they're talking about the TOT taxes. They're going to pay for it out of that. Well, the TOT tax goes to the general fund, to the discretionary funds, and 70% of the discretionary funds goes to public safety. If they're going to take that money to operate the CSD, the TOT tax, well, then they're taking it away from the public safety. We're already strapped for public safety dollars at the moment. So we look at that and say these guys are out of their minds because they want to continue raising more taxes.
So you use the term TOT. I'm not sure everybody's going to know what that means. So let's define that.
Transient occupancy tax.
Okay, so that's like a hotel tax?
It is like a hotel tax. It is the short-term rental under 30 days. So if you go up for a weekend, you go up for a week, you're going to pay a certain percentage, it's 9%. Then there's an included bed tax, which goes to the Visitors Bureau. That's supposed to promote the tourism up in District 5, up in Bass Lake and the surrounding areas.
And that whole idea was proposed by your opponent?
The Community Service District was proposed by my opponent, is being promoted by my opponent, and Tom Wheeler is going to put it up onto the board supervisor's floor for a vote back in September 14th of last year, 2001, or 21, excuse me, and they approved it. So now it has to go through a feasibility study with LAFCO, and once they do that, then they're going to send it out. Now, my opponent has constantly asked me, well, do you not understand the difference between an independent, community service district? And I said, yeah, I do. It's just a governance. The dependent one is governed by the 5 board of supervisors. Okay, they make the decisions. They send out a 218 if they want to raise the taxes in order to supply one of the services of the 19 services that are on the community service district proposal.
So this is a general one where it just goes in the general fund, and it really depends on the will of the board of supervisors as to how it's allocated.
Well, they raise taxes. is what they do. And let me read this to you. It says the CSD is initiated by petition of registered voters or adopted of a resolution at the county level. That there describe independent versus dependent. If it's an independent, then it's done by the registered voters by a petition. If it's a dependent community service district, it's done by a resolution. So this has already been done. The resolution has been passed. The CSD cannot be formed without a 2/3 majority vote of residents living within the proposed boundaries. Once approved, the CSD will take over functions previously operated by the county. Provision of any new services requires a majority vote of the registered voters in the CSD. So right there, as soon as the CSD is formed and a new service is approved, let's say they want to take street lighting or parks and rec or fuel reduction or the fire, and the citizens say, okay, we can. Well, now your property taxes that you pay now cannot be used by the county in that CSD. And there's a statement by Tom Wheeler stating that. Okay.
So then where do you stand on all this?
I'm against the community service district 100%. You see, and this is where it gets right into how is the annual charge determined, okay, for the CSD. When a CSD exists, the property owner will pay taxes to the CSD instead of the county for the services provided. Taxes are calculated upon assessed value of the land and improvements and placed on the property tax bill. The CSD was formed only for supplying water for irrigation. However, the taxes can be based upon the value of the land only, disregarding improvements. CSDs are limited to a maximum tax levy of 1% of assessed value unless the majority vote authorizes it to exceed that limit. Additionally, a CSD may levy taxes on in excess of 1% to pay debt services on general obligation bonds that were previously adopted by the majority vote. So you understand that.
So
the board of
I understand where we're at.
Right.
I understand where you stand. Just as importantly, where does Bobby McCauley stand on this one?
Oh, he's the one proposing it.
Okay. I wanted that very clear to everybody
he's
here.
Proposing it. If he gets elected, he's going to go forward with this.
So we have a pro-tax Republican.
Right.
And we have a anti-tax Republican.
Well, exactly. And this is...
And by the way, you're a long-standing Republican. It is concerning to me that your opponent decided to be a Republican just before the June primary.
Yeah, in late December of 2020. So realistically, he was a Republican in January 2021. His first election that he voted in as a Republican was his own. Prior to that, he voted in 2 general elections for presidency. That would have been Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. And I've heard the rumors that he voted for Hillary Clinton. And then the next one he voted in was Donald Trump with Joe Biden. And I've heard the same thing. He didn't vote for Trump again.
Now, in your race, there's a lot of mudslinging, unfortunately. I'm not seeing a whole lot from the campaigns, but he has a group of woke leftists that always have something to say. I don't know if he's directing them or they're just nuts, but I want to point out that they're vehemently against you and they're very pro Bobby. And when I then do more research on these individuals, and I'm not going to name any of them.
Oh, neither am I.
They're all hard leftists, yet they're very pro Bobby. That's well, it leaves me with a big question mark. Well, okay, what's going on here?
Well, if you look at his endorsement list and versus my endorsement list, he's got labor unions. That's all he's got. Whether it's the sheriff's, the deputy sheriff's labor union, whether it's the prosecutor's labor union, whether it's the MMU, which is the chapter of CAL FIRE 2881, which is the statewide one. You know, those are labor unions, and it's a small percentage of the individuals that they're actually representing. Okay, yes, we love the fire department. We love CAL FIRE. We love the sheriff's department. We love the law enforcement. We love the prosecutors. We love the DA. We love the sheriff. But these are labor unions with labor contracts with the county, and they definitely want the weakest individual that they can get the most out of in their contracts rather than the reverse. As a businessman, I want to get the services that I'm paying for. So we need to look into these contracts and make sure that the county is actually getting the services they're paying for. And, so my endorsements are all of the ranchers and the farmers, cattlemen's, the president of the Cattlemen's Association.
You mean conservative groups?
Well, there's also heavy conservative organizations throughout the state, throughout Madera County. Every conservative and Republican organization in Madera County has endorsed me. I mean, even our Congressman Tom McClintock has endorsed me. So you look at those factors involved, and then you look at what he doesn't say. He doesn't say what you just said, that the major supporters of his that are vocal are from the left. I did that on a mailer. And when I did it on a mailer, I got crucified all the way down to San Diego for it. But it is fact. The major ones are. Now, what you don't see on his endorsement list is SEIU. Okay, you won't find it published anywhere, but he has the SEIU endorsement. He has received, I believe, $2,000 from SEIU.
Well, some of those hardcore leftists that I've mentioned that are very much vocal supporters of his are SEIU members. I know that for a fact. I've done some research.
No, absolutely. And SEIU, if you do your research on SEIU, they wanted to remove firefighters and law enforcement from the labor movement because it conflicted with BLM, Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter and SEIU are tied to the hip. Bobby is the president of the Boys and Girls Club. He promotes Black Lives Matter within the Boys and Girls Club, already indoctrinating those children there. And everybody has a right to do what they want to do. I mean, if they want to indoctrinate children, go right ahead. But
then why be a Republican?
But be outright about it. That you are a left-leaning individual. All the data, and it's not that I'm, and I'm probably they're probably gonna come out again now and say I'm a racist, and I'm not a racist. I mean, one of my top donors is a black-owned, recycling company out of LA. He's a good friend of mine. Another good friend of mine was Ted Durden. He was my co-host on my radio show. It has nothing.
I can even name another group that they're clearly not white.
Yeah, well,
the Sikh community seems to strongly stand with you, and I know that personally.
The Punjabi and the Sikh community are 100% behind me at this point. The Punjabi American Growers Group have endorsed me. There's over 750 farmers involved with that, controlling over 100,000 acres of farmland. The Madera County Republican Hispanic the Republican, I always mix up the acronym. It is the Madera County Hispanic Republican National Assembly has endorsed me as well. Okay, so I'm in the farthest from racist that you can get because I'm not even white. I'm really brown skinned. I'm American Indian. So and that's why I get a kick out of it when people say, "Well, you're racist." Well, if I'm racist, then you're trying to say an American Indian is racist, and that's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, but that is typical. I did some research, and this came up. This is Bobby's brother. Anything to say about that one? Because I know some of the stuff that has come up against you, and I've read about it.
As I've mentioned before in my past interviews, I know a lot about the McCauley family, and I refuse to dive into the mud. I refuse to make even comments about this. It came across my desk as well at the campaign, and I said, no, I don't want to use it, even though we did confirm it was correct. It is true. It is real. But the issue is that we all have problems in our family. We all have problems in our past. So does Bobby. But we're running for a position now. What are we doing now in our lives? Not 30 years ago, in Bobby's case, 10, 15 years ago, because he's still a kid. He's 36 years old. But I'm just not going to dive into that mud. That is horrible mud. You destroy people's lives. His poor brother there, whatever he's going through, I'll pray for him, and I hope that he has recovery from whatever's going on in his life. But, it's not the thing to do. Period. But, I appreciate that you brought it up.
Well, but we can leave it right there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see what would happen.
No,
it says a lot about character.
Absolutely it does.
I want to point out that I invited Bobby on the show yesterday because he's already called me a liar and said that no, he never contacted us. So I've now, this will be, I believe, the 5th time. Here I'm on air. Give us a call, Bobby. I'll make it happen. Doesn't even have to be on my show. I'm pretty darn certain I can get you on the air. I would love to get both of you on the air with a different host because you're going to say I'm biased. Okay. I'll get you on with a different host. And both of you can actually let the community...
Get them on with Guillermo.
You can let the community that you want to represent know what you think, where you stand. Actually, maybe a little bit of a debate. I think that's healthy.
Well, he was invited, I know, to 2 of them, I believe. I know I was invited to 2, and I said, sure. I believe it's incumbent upon us to put ourselves out there to have questions asked, and we answer them, forthright. And so we do that, but they haven't come to fruition.
Well, there's still a little time. You can have a change of heart.
I made the comment before, if I performed as poorly as he did in the 3 or 4, debates that we did in the primary, I would never do a debate again in my life.
I would like to believe that he thinks he can raise his game. We're going to go ahead and take a break.
All right.
This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Want to say thank you to everybody that's watching on social media. 2nd show of the week. I'm a lot more comfortable having a guest, but it was interesting flying solo yesterday. It is a different experience. The level of energy, and there's a real learning curve.
It tempers us.
Yes,
it does.
It does. But I'm glad I went through it.
Yeah.
I didn't run from it. I went, okay, I don't have a guest. Off we go.
Well, now you know how Rush Limbaugh felt.
Yes, but he was amazing.
He did hours of shows, solo, and
he was a perfectionist.
Yeah, he knew how to do a good production. He had his stuff laid out. He didn't do it he did the show by himself.
No, but
he had a lot of people that were investigating.
By the time he was national, he was. Yeah. He had an absolute staff that researched stuff, and
he had a good
gave
team.
Him options
he had
constantly.
A good team, and that's when I had my show. That was the same thing. We had a team that investigated different topics that we wanted to talk about. My co-host Ted, we made a deal that we would do a monologue each, and we, off and on. I'd do one week, you'd do the next week.
So by your show, not everybody knows name of the show, where you did it.
We went throughout the state of California, and we did it on LA Talk Radio.
Let's go ahead and go back.
It was called The Voice of Reason.
Voice of Reason. My time management isn't great today. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. One more time for the studio audience, because I believe we were still on
social
air.
Media.
We were just came off of social media.
Right.
You were with Ted. You did a show, podcast.
We did a podcast. It's still a lot of the episodes are still on Facebook. It's called The Voice of Reason.
So you can find out more about you and see additional information.
Yeah, I believe a lot of the episodes with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was on there. Michael Reagan was on there. Senator Stevens was on there. We had quite a few. Dr. Wen Shen was on there. Dr. Nordella was on there. We talked about all the issues with COVID, about hydroxychloroquine, and what is the other one? I'm trying to think of the other one now. Ivermectin.
Which you couldn't even do now.
Maybe
now it's finally turned, but we had months of not being able to do that.
Still, the pharmacies are not allowed to fill the prescriptions because they're not approved by the FDA for that application. So you have to find a doctor in a pharmacy that is willing to do that. But we got the COVID, we got over it in a day and a half. We had some lingering effects, but basically the body aches and the temperature and that stuff was gone in a day and a half. So we recovered quite quickly from it.
My point is, before you were running for office, people can look you up, watch you on those shows, and get a sense of who you are when you didn't have any skin in the game, when you weren't playing. You were just being who you were. Now, I've watched several of those shows because I always research my guests.
Right.
And I typically also research their opponents. There's one more thing I want to address with Bobby before we move into your plan for fixing your county.
Right.
He had another type of person that kind of gave an endorsement by giving him big money. Now, that isn't all bad, except how come almost all of his big money seems to be coming from Fresno County, not from Madera County, and almost all of it seems to be developers, home builders, people like that. And they're not giving a little bit of money.
Well,
they're giving up to the maximum.
They're giving,
$2,000 or more, up to the almost $10,000 if we round it.
No, there's no maximum.
I thought there was a maximum.
No, there is no maximum. You can contribute whatever you want. So these guys, Bob McCaffrey is the top donor at $9,800.
Okay.
He has a lot of $7,500 donors, $5,000 donors, $2,500 donors down the line, and a lot of them are from outside of the area.
Almost all of them.
Now, you've done more of the research than I have, and I'm just running. I'm running for this office to change
I'd like to know
the macro problems. But
what's up with that? I mean, that's concerning to me.
I sat down with Bob McCaffrey, his top donor. I sat down with him, and my campaign manager was there, and I wanted to introduce myself after the primary, not before the primary, because realistically, he should have won the primary. He had all the advantages. He had the chief of staff position of the county supervisor. He had the county supervisor behind him. He had the other supervisors behind him. He had all the donors from Tom Wheeler behind him as well. He raised $131,000 in the primary. He's only raised, I believe, it's another $40,000 to $45,000 in the general election now. He spent $130,000, like I said, in the primary. He should have won it hands down.
Wow, I mean that's. For a small county, I've asked some other people.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot. That's way more than normal.
A lot of money.
Way more than normal.
Yeah.
More than double normal. I've talked to some people from other small counties that have similar demographics.
70,000, and that's about it. That's where we're at right now. It's about 60,000, 65, and we're doing great. Our polling is really up there. I mean, we're happy. We're still fighting like we're at 58 or 48%. But we are up there. We are the winning thing. We're getting a lot of feedback from supporters of his that are coming quietly saying, we're voting for Mark Reed because we think he's going to win. That's it. But Bob McCaffrey, in my meeting, I told him that I wanted to just introduce myself. I wasn't there to ask for money and or support. It was an introduction because one of us is going to be the county supervisor, whether it's Bobby or myself. Mm-hmm. In our conversations, he revealed that he has never met Bobby. He has never talked to Bobby. He did this donation based on Tom Wheeler's recommendation and request, and also assurance that Bobby was going to be exactly like him in his decisions. So this is kind of the norm that I've been hearing about, is that realistically, Tom is trying to put Bobby in the spot. And that's it. And this is what people are banking on. Now, he's raised a heck of a lot less money in the general election because realistically, like I said, he should have won the primary. He should have won it. But the community rejected him. The community now has had a lot longer time to look at the two candidates. They're seeing that I have a lot of signs out there as well. I have a lot of support out there. I have massive endorsements from community organizations, community leaders, law enforcement as well, and the name has gotten out there quite good. The contract with the community that I developed with 24 members.
Good, you beat me there because we're going. Yeah,
has been received very well by the community. I mean, the only response they continue saying is, "How are you going to afford all these things? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that?" Well, there's an old cliche, and you might have heard of this cliche before. There's enough furniture in the room. We can rearrange it. Okay, and that's on a budget aspect.
Can you give an outline of what you mean by contract with the community before we get into
the contract with the community? Lays out the general plan, the area plans. It goes into the fire. It goes into the housing. It goes into infrastructure, infrastructure of water and sewage. How we're going to address it. What capital investments we need to do, also into the economy, the building of the economy. How do we entice more businesses to come to the area?
So essentially planning for the future.
Planning for the future, being more proactive than reactive. I mean, if you're reactive in any business, you're behind the ball. But if you're proactive, you're planning out 5, 10 years from now, and you're setting up systems for that.
Now,
And this is what I've talked to a lot of constituents in business about, is I'm not interested in the micro issues. That's handled by local, and that's handled by people within the community. You're looking at the macro issues, and the macro issues we have now is fire protection. Yes, the police is great, but unless we have a DA that's given the funds to be able to implement prosecution of individuals who break the law, then we're putting the law enforcement into a bad position because these guys are being released before they're even processed.
so who creates this? You created the outline. Who implements this plan?
Well, the Board of Supervisors implements the plan.
Okay, and who creates the plan? Well, I mean, you created the overall outline to flesh in the details. Who do you go to?
You create the resolutions to give to Jay Varney. Jay Varney then goes to the departments. They have to now put it together, bring it back to the Board of Supervisors, and we review it again. And if we agree with it in that outline, then we approve it.
Okay.
But it has to go through general counsel. It has to go through all the proper committees within the county structure. The county Board of Supervisors are the, what you call it, they set the agenda. Okay, and Jay Varney, the CAO of the county, is the one who has to implement it with the staff of the county itself.
And where does the general public have an opportunity to give input? Are there committees that go with each one of these, or?
Well, this is where, even with the area plans, O'Neill's has already constituted their committee. They already have their first draft of the revamping of their area plan. Wani and Nipawasi is together. It's basically two area plans in itself. They've already reconstituted their committee. They're waiting for the Board of Supervisors to appoint and approve, basically me, because I'll bring that forward. It's in my district, to bring it forward and to make the committee official.
So where I was kind of going with all this is, it's not top down. It's you gave a blueprint, and now you're allowing local control to go before to have their own committees.
Yes.
It's not like you're imposing a plan upon the district, but rather you're empowering people to exercise their local control.
I believe in the bottom up. If you look at the contract with the community on my website at www.supervisormarkreed.com, it's right at the top. If you look at the contract, the first thing that it says on the contract is creating community advisory boards. In these and I already have a couple of individuals who want to chair those. And it's going to be made up of community leaders, even from the chambers of commerce and so forth, any organization. I just had another meet and greet the other day where we had about 60 people there. And one of the pistachio farmers was there and asking questions. Laying out, there's three major elements. You have the cattlemen and the farmers down in the flat land. You have the mountain people up in the area, and their problems are very similar. Now you have a group of people moving in from Fresno and outside of the areas into Riverstone and into Tercero Viejo, and their attitudes are different. They don't understand the lifestyle of the ag people and the cattle people.
So they're not the same rugged individualists.
They could be rugged. They just their priorities are different.
Well, they're city people. That's what I would guess.
Well, they're just, I don't hate labeling them. There's just priorities are different because a lot of the city people, they still have families. They want to raise their family. They have a different way of earning money. They rely on somebody else to create a business, and they're in there and they're working with that business. Where when you're dealing with a cattle rancher, right? They got
I got family that are cattle ranchers. You're speaking my language.
You got 10,000 acres. Okay, you have to figure out when the cattle got to come in, when they go up to high country, when they come back down. If you're a farmer, it's the same thing. When do you plant? How do you do this? How do you do that? And you've got to plan all year round for these things. And it's a lot of money. You're talking a lot of money that are working through these organizations, these businesses. So you have those interests, and it's beyond the concepts of a person living in a tract housing area. They have their interests and their priorities. Some of them are similar to the cattlemen. Some of them are not. Same thing with the mountain people up in the mountain areas. Yes, they are very rugged, but even the mountain people over in North Fork, O'Neill's, and Raymond, They'll look at somebody that was raised in Oakhurst, never really left Oakhurst. They're a city person too. And Oakhurst is a small area, okay?
Yeah.
But they'll look at him as a city person. You were raised by your family. You never left Oakhurst. You never did anything. You left Oakhurst to go to Channel Islands for a couple of years, get a college education. You came back. You still have this city mentality, living on a large piece of ground, raising animals, raising crops creates a whole different mindset.
Absolutely.
I love Tony to death over at El Cid, and he's a mountain man. And we were talking about family, and he says he hates wild game. He said, I just can't stand the taste anymore.
Well,
So my brother-in-law was that way. He moved out to Georgia, and he lived on venison for him and his family for 6 years because they couldn't afford to go to the store and buy meat. So they lived on venison. He said, he goes, I won't touch it anymore. He goes, I can't stand the taste.
I'm going to go ahead and give that little restaurant a plug. Typically, that's one of my go-to places when I'm coming back from Yosemite. Love the bird feeders, particularly.
Yeah.
Well, there's hummingbird feeders and
Yeah.
there's birdseed feeders.
Yeah.
So you got a beautiful view on the side of a hill, good food,
Yeah.
nice little Mexican restaurant at the far end of Oakhurst, kind of towards Yosemite.
Yep.
And so that's me giving the plug, not
It's
you.
a plug.
I'm just
It's
appreciating a good place.
But you forgot the name. You gave the plug. It's El Cid.
I figured you'd take care of me.
Oh yeah, I absolutely. No, I love the place. My wife and I just ate there last night. I've been having a hankering for the albondiga soup. I grew up on it. My abuelita, my grandmother, my wife's grandmother, my wife's mom, and my wife all make it. It's the greatest soup ever.
You are a lucky man
But
because it is great.
it is the great, and I've had that soup at other Mexican restaurants, and it's just not the same. They do it right there. It's not just all water and just a few vegetables and a few meatballs. It's a lot of meatballs, a lot of vegetables in there, and it's just so good. It is. It's like mom's home cooked meal.
Yep. Now I took us down a path, so sorry.
Yeah, you did.
Nonetheless, that kind of I was leading towards. I've heard that you're not really connected with the Oakhurst community.
Oh my!
Well, I've heard your opponents say, "Oh yeah," and I've heard his hardcore left supporters. You're just a carpetbagger. Talk about some of your connections to the community. I purposely let that one happen without revealing where I was going.
Well,
and here he knew all about this restaurant.
Well, some of my very good friends, James over at Yosemite Lumber. I've known him now for 4 decades. 3 decades.
How is that possible? You're just a carpetbagger. You don't know
I just
Oakhurst.
showed up. Glenn and Sandy Moore, Ed Moore, Donnie Moore, and Sarah Moore across the street are my neighbors. I've known them they called me Monkey Boy because of my monkey. I used to bring my monkey up to our mountain house or cabin and stuff. So
I've heard about that monkey.
So I stopped in at Glenn and Sandy's shop, and so I was a Monkey Boy. A lot of my stuff in my cabin came from there, but I've known them for 40 years. My cousin was a CHP officer up here for several years before he got the dignitary patrol, and he actually ran it up in Sacramento back in when Arnold Schwarzenegger was in office.
So my point was you have connection to the community and family in the community.
I have family in the community. I got family in North Fork, but yet my opponent's supporters have railed on me so much that you would think that I just showed up here yesterday. In fact, Deborah Kroon, a very good friend of mine, she wrote an open letter endorsement. It's on Facebook, an open letter endorsement, and said that she sold us the house that we live in now 9 years ago. She met us, and my conversation about family, about community, about giving back, about my patriotism, about free marketplace and property rights has never changed. And she's known me for over 2 decades in the community. She just remembered she sold me that house, right? But
wait, you didn't just find conservatism and become a Republican just
for this
last
race?
year?
Just for this race? No.
Oh.
No. This is my way of life. But in the way I've always couched it with everybody who has listened is that, look, I've been a lifelong conservative, and I'll pronounce that better because somebody said I said I was the only white conservative. I am a lifelong conservative constitutionalist who registered Republican at 18 years old, has never missed an election yet. I have voted in every single election because I understand my civic duties. But being a businessman, okay, being a business owner and employing people, more than my monkey and myself, as people have said, I've learned to be very pragmatic because in order to supply services and goods to anybody, to everybody, you have to be pragmatic in your decisions and understanding that everybody counts.
We're going to go ahead and take a break.
All righty.
This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Again, thank you, folks. It is a lot more comfortable sitting here with a good guest. I actually believe in this man. I believe he's genuine. I've looked him in the eye. We've had multiple conversations. You need to do your civic duty and get out and vote. And I would suggest this is a good way to go.
It is so important to get out and vote.
We're going to go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today I am joined by Mark Reed. He is running for Madera County Supervisor, District 5.
District 5.
And that is pretty much all of eastern Madera County?
All of eastern Madera County, following the San Joaquin River, basically up.
So
it does some interesting dog legs in there.
So from a little bit of tree farming, up through a little dry area where it's pistachios, up into cattle, all the way into lumber.
All the way into lumber. Well, there's not so much lumber being done.
Not anymore, but there could be.
There could be. I'm a heavy proponent of bringing back the lumber industry and logging. No questions about it.
Well, you have to do something. Either you allow prescribed burns, or you harvest the lumber. And the Indians did that as far back as there are records from the Spanish. They burned certain areas because they didn't want a mega fire.
Remember Devin Nunes's famous quote when he ran for Congress for re-election. He said, log it and graze it or watch it burn. We're watching it burn because the environmentalists have handcuffed the Forestry Department and the U.S. Forestry Department. They've handcuffed them so bad, and all the logging companies have been driven out of California. There was 178 of them. There's 23 of them now. They have created the most unhealthy forest that we've ever seen.
Well,
and because they've made it impossible even to go in there and cut down dead trees.
And it's too many trees per acre.
Yeah, way too many trees per acre. You've got the trash can, bull pines up there sucking 150 gallons of water a day. They need to be harvested out of there and taken out. We need a pellet company to come up there and start manufacturing the pellets for the pellet stoves to utilize all of that lumber that's being cut down. And there's so many things that can be done with innovation. There's so many things that are being done in other counties that need to be brought here. And this is what I've talked about all along is what do you bring to the county to enhance it? What businesses do you bring to enhance the economy? What do you do about the water issues? And I've laid those all out.
What are your top 3 issues?
Redoing the general plan and the area plans. Housing is a major one, and that's a huge onion peel that you got to do with housing, and that is making the permits easier for rooftop permits up in the mountain areas. Right now it takes 9 months to 1 year to get a permit. The fees are extraordinarily high. We need to look at that and say, even if we have to outsource it, if you walk in with a building plan from an architect and an engineer, why does it take over 30 days for that to be reviewed and be given? And there should be interagency cooperation to get the utilities installed so you can start building that house within 60 days after you submitted your permit, because you already have a lot of money into it. You have money into the architecture, you have money into the engineering, you have the permit fees, you've got your bridge loans going in, you have the purchase of the property. You want to start building your home. We need to make it easier for the single homes to be built up there, and this will help ease the housing issues. We also need to deal with the affordable housing aspect, and that is some more of the, even if it's apartment buildings or single, duplexes being built and be given on the Section 8 where they can come in and rent them. because we need more of that. There's no question.
And if you don't do that, the state is going to do it for you. So you need to create your own plan to take
That's
care
right.
of affordable housing.
Right.
That this is not just your county. This is all of California.
Remember from Gavin Newsom signing the bill, I believe it was Newsom or Brown signed the bill, that all rental housing now is affordable housing. You can walk in with vouchers to any rental house and they cannot deny the voucher. If otherwise you can get sued. I know that as a landlord myself. Somebody walks in and they have vouchers, they filled it all out, and they say, well, and you deny them the rental because of that, they can sue you for it. So every rental house on the market now is considered into the affordable housing market. Now, can they afford that base fee? Well, if you're only making $10 an hour or $12 an hour, no, you're not going to be able to afford it. This is why the economy has to be built in the Eastern Madera County area.
So we got 1 and 2. What was that third one? That's your priorities.
Is roads.
Roads.
Okay. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. It dives into the macro problems that are existing in the county. And part of that, in order to deal with those three, you're going to have a good chief of staff that has the analytical mind of looking at a budget and being able to decipher that budget and figure out how to move the furniture around to set your priorities, which would be the fire, the sheriff's department, the judicial system. And then you look into now getting into fuel reductions, you get into the roads, you get into a whole bunch of different aspects of how you shift it around. We've already done the analysis of other counties that are very similar in population and size. In the general government, just like in Fresno itself, it has, I'm trying to remember numbers now. I think it's 3 times the budget that we have, but yet their general government is only 7%. The general government of Madera County is 13% of the budget. The fire department is, I think, 10%. Our fire services here, fire protection services, at 1.9% of the budget.
Well, I can see where fire should be higher just because of the terrain, but Fresno's budget, city of Fresno, is roughly 1.7 billion. It's somewhere close to
about 3 times that, because we're at $440+ million in our budget. Okay, so they're 3 times. But you look at the percentages that are going to the priorities. That's where your priorities are at. Okay, the 70% of the discretionary funds goes to public safety, but that doesn't go to fire. Even though my opponent and Tom Wheeler said, oh, it goes to fire. No, it doesn't. It goes to public safety. The lion's share, still 1.7%, roughly. Don't quote me on that. About 1.7% of the discretionary funds goes to fire. The lion's share still goes to the sheriff's department, the probation department, the jails, and the DA's office. Okay, so you look at where are our priorities within our budget. It should always be fire and public safety all the time. So that's where it should be shifted to. So I've said this because Jordan Wamoff has said some of the questions he's gotten is, well, what departments are you going to cut in order to fund more fire? Well, it's a 2-pronged thing. You have to increase the economy to bring more money in. The other way of thinking is increase taxes to bring more money in. Well, you drive businesses out, which cuts the taxes down. That's what they're doing with the ag industry and the cattle right. industry here. Is they're going to cut taxes by raising taxes, fees, and fines and making it more impossible for them to operate.
So they'll go out of business and then they get nothing.
Well, they're going to go out of business, or the people who are poor are going to have to rely on food banks more because food is going to go so sky high that they can't afford it anymore.
Well, roughly 20% is white area.
Yeah.
The farming out there, somewhere in that range.
It's just like, you go into the market and you look at beef anymore and the cost of beef. It's like, whoa, yeah, I mean, it's a delicacy anymore.
We're down to about a minute. Why are you hopeful and why should they elect you?
I'm extremely hopeful because on the ground, the way polling is going by telephone and on the ground, we're in the 60+ percentile. So we're very happy there. Like I said, we're still working the ground. We're still doing the telephones. Nobody has walked precincts like we've walked. We've walked all kinds of communities. We have 4 groups going out every day, walking, knocking on doors. We've sent over 60,000 pieces of mail out. We've made over 10,000 phone calls. I mean, we're getting very good response. And so we're very happy about it. And the reason why I'm running is very simple. I'm a businessman with 48 years of business experience, 37 years of business ownership. There's macro issues in the management of the county that need to be looked at and addressed. So if you want to find out more about me, just go to my website at www.supervisormarkreed.com. Look at my contract with the community. Give me a call and let me know what your thoughts are. Even if you want to just call me up and tell me off, you can do that too, because that's what we're here for. We're here for you.
I'm going to let you give all that contact information on the other side of the break.
Okay.
We're going to go ahead. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXCX, the best talk in town. So now for social media, so people have time to get a pen and paper. If they want to call you, you've got a contact number. If you've got a website, go ahead, go through that.
If you want to call me, my phone number is 559-676-9825. Again, 559-676-9825. And I promise once elected, I will not change that number. So you'll be able to get a hold of me through my whole tenure.
Cool.
My website is www.supervisormarkreed.com. And my contract with the community is on there. It's up at the top. My endorsement list is on there as well, which is about 3.5 pages of endorsements. But they're not just people who've donated money to me. I've got a lot of people who've donated money from the community that don't want to be on an endorsement list because of the attacks that they've been getting. So they very quietly are supporting me, and they've given money. So if you dive into that list, that's different. But the actual organizations, individuals, law enforcement, in CAL FIRE, retired CAL FIRE individuals, they're all on there. It's a huge list of people, but the list is probably twice that size of people who just don't want the rancor. We had, Eric, real quick, we had Steve and Kristen Bateman come out and endorse me. They used to own Steve's Pet Shop and the corner feed store. They sold it, okay? However, the owners of that Steve's Pet Shop and also the corner feed store came out with a full endorsement for me. And they put it out. They changed the header on their Facebook page to Mark Reed for Supervisor. They've asked all other small businesses to get involved. The rancor that came out of the far left that are go after me on, they went after the business. They've gone after Pete's, because Pete's restaurant, he kind of threw caution to the wind because he's closing doors in December, right after the election. So he's like, well, you can't really hurt me, I'm done anyways, right? And they went after these businesses saying, we're never going to. That is that progressive socialist mentality of not allowing your independent right to support who you want to support. It doesn't matter. In a community, you can support who you want to support, and you should not fear retaliation. That's it. But you shouldn't aggressively go after. I'll support my candidate. I have friends that actually supported Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump, and we're still friends. I've got people that are supportive of my campaign that have friends that support my opponent.
What a crazy thought. Tolerance in America?
Yeah. I mean, you accept it. And I'll be able to accept without a problem, the results of this election. Even if I win, I'll be really happy. If I lose, I'll be just as happy. Because
your life will be simpler.
It'll be a little simpler, But if I win, I also know that it's going to be another challenge to bring the community back together again, to reach out to these people who don't know me, who've been so vocal and so vicious against me, to be able to reach out to them and say, look, I'm your county supervisor. I'm here to work for you. How can I help you? I've already instructed my campaign manager to go out and list all of the businesses and all of the ranches that have Bobby's, signs on there. And flat out, I'm going to contact them and say, hi, I'm your county supervisor. I'm here to work for you. I just want to let you know that I'm your supervisor. I'm here. I'm your public servant. Reach out if you have any needs. Let me know.
Well,
and that's what a county supervisor should do.
We're going to go ahead and wrap it up, but I sure appreciate your time. And Mark, I definitely wish you the best of luck, because I believe you can make a real difference for your community.
Thank you, Eric.
That's a wrap.
There we go.